So, Cornell, I want to talk to you about this last week. This young 10-year-old, very intelligent-looking young lady, a black young lady at a Pearland school who will not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in her classroom.
Kicked her out of the classroom for 10 minutes.
Being repeatedly punished over the course of a school year because she refused to stand during the Pledge of Allegiance.
Says she was humiliated by a teacher for protesting the Pledge of Allegiance.
A 10-year-old boy from Arkansas is taking a stand by sitting down.
I couldn't bring myself to recite it anymore.
America looked at the same way at Rosa Parks.
I've been repeatedly called a gay wad.
But, like, is she going to stop using money? Because it says, in God we trust.
Brave. Would you ask Jewish children to say a pledge to a German anthem that disrespects Jewish people?
You'd like to think that they'd have respect and stand anyway.
I would say she should have to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I don't like our government.
Then why don't you move to a different country?
Ma'am, with all due respect, you can go jump off a bridge.
Until there really is, as the pledge says, liberty and justice for all.
The Pledge of Allegiance. It has caused enormous controversy. In many different regions of the country, there is a clear divide of those in favor of the pledge and what it represents, and those who believe that the pledge is unimportant or even oppressive.
Recently in our home state of Missouri, a bill had been passed requiring schools to recite the pledge every morning. Before this, our school, Affton High, only recited it once a week. So the question was raised, what do students think of our National Pledge of Allegiance? Is the tension between those who do stand and those who don't stand at an all-time high? What does this tell us about how our country is divided?
Before we began, our group decided to do some research on the pledge and its history. Originally, the pledge was written by American Christian socialist author Francis Bellamy in order to sell American flags. The government then decided to utilize the pledge as a national mantra in order to reunite the country after the Civil War. The pledge was very popular, and by World War II, every state had issued laws requiring regular recitation of the pledge in public schools. We started by interviewing some of our classmates. Savannah, a freshman, is very supportive of the pledge.
Because overseas or not overseas, there are people fighting for our freedom, fighting for us, and I believe it's very important to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance, and people who do not are awful to me. I hear people who say it's annoying to stand up. It's also not someone's idea to die in the war or not see their family for months on end. We have a choice to stand up, to say the pledge, but there are people around me who I make them stand up. I drag them up with me, and I say it very strongly.
On the other side of the spectrum, Kahar, a junior attending Affton High School, has a number of objections.
I don't believe in having to stand up without learning why we have to stand for the pledge. But most of the people who stand don't understand what they're doing. It's been ingrained into our, it's a social norm by now because in kindergarten, it's just something they taught us to do just because without telling us the meaning. When you think about it, if we heard about another country that did this type of thing, we would call it brainwashing and how backwards it is, but we do it every day.
Still, there are others who object to the pledge, but it seems to not be due to the ideological reasons. For example, Haben, a freshman at Affton High School, doesn't stand because she believes the pledge to be oppressive to groups in America, in particular the black community.
I feel like that America itself has not treated black people as equal as they should be to everyone, so I don't stand because I feel like it's not a part of me. I feel like I'm getting discriminated against, so why should I stand up for something that hurts me? I don't think it relates to me at all, actually, because they talk about equality, and that's not something a lot of African American people or people of color have exactly. So.
What we found throughout interviews is that few people are as adamant about the pledge as Gar and Savannah. Most people we've interviewed have a much more moderate stance. An Affton High School teacher, Mr. Walker, for example, has a relatively centrist view.
Forcing traditions on people is necessarily the best thing. I don't see it being too big of an issue. If you can see a positive in those traditions, then you should keep them. And if they want to recite it and mean it, great, it's meaningful. And if students don't want to, they can opt out of it. And I think that's what we have now. So right now, I don't see it being a big problem.
Other students don't stand simply because they don't want to.
Why do you sit?
Because I want to. I don't want to get up. I don't care about the pledge.
But the question remained, is the Pledge of Allegiance polarizing the nation against itself, pitting those that don't want to stand against those that do?
From what we found, not really. There are those that are bemused by other people not standing.
They need to show some respect and stand up. That's what I say.
I guess it's kind of disrespectful.
People should stand. I do believe that you should stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I think it's kind of disrespectful.
But overwhelmingly, we found that our classmates responded with,
they have their valid reason. Whatever you want, you can stand or not stand.
I respect everyone's beliefs, so it doesn't bother me.
Don't care.
It's their choice. Yeah, but if you stand, that's great. If you sit, that's also great.
It's a free nation. They have the right to do that.
That's their right as an American citizen.
However, it's hard to praise our classmates for tolerance when their acceptance seems to be more like apathy than anything else.
How do you believe the Pledge of Allegiance affects you?
Personally, I don't feel all that affected by it.
I mean, it doesn't really affect me.
What effect? I don't think it's changed anything.
Doesn't really affect.
I don't really think it affects me positively or negatively. Other people might think differently.
I don't think it does.
Really don't affect me that much.
Because when I think about it, I can't remember it unless I start from the very beginning. I don't feel necessarily a deep meaning behind it.
And I've never really sat down and thought about the words that I was speaking.
I have to do it, so I just do it.
Mostly because everyone stands.
Because I've been doing it ever since I was in kindergarten, so.
All of this raises the question, if American students don't care about the Pledge of Allegiance, then why does our government support it so strongly? Why do we need to say it every day? To answer this, we asked more of our classmates and teachers, what does the Pledge of Allegiance mean? Why do we say it?
Why do you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I stand for the Pledge of Allegiance because I've had many military people that I know in my family. A couple of my dad's friends went to the military, so I feel like it's very important, to honor them and honor the people that have died, serving our country and making us have freedom.
Because that's how I was taught from a young age, and my dad was in the military.
Like I said, I stand for anyone that served this country that fought and died for us. Both my parents served, so I stand for that. I stand for just everything America stands for.
I stand because I think it supports America and our troops.
The people that just fought for our country, or the people that died.
An emphasis on the troops immediately became clear. But we found that many people don't share in the belief that the Pledge of Allegiance is primarily about soldiers.
I stand, I guess just to show my support, for the country, my patriotism, I guess. I don't know.
I stand because it's out of respect, and I was always taught that you stand during the Pledge of Allegiance because it's patriotic, so you stand. So I just stand out of respect.
I stand because, I just feel that the Pledge of Allegiance it's necessary to stand up for what I believe in, what this country means.
I'm not quite sure. I guess it's something we've always kind of done. I guess it's kind of traditional.
When I say the Pledge of Allegiance, I feel like I'm pledging to uphold that goal of making this the best society on the nation.
In our confusion, we decided to contact Shane Roden, a Missouri State representative from Cedar Hill. Roden was in fact the legislator who sponsored the bill requiring schools statewide to recite the pledge each morning. The representative gave us his time and furthered our investigation.
The whole reason why I even sponsored the bill was originally we had 4 high schoolers come to me from our local high school here in Northwest School District in Cedar Hill, and approached me from their government class about wanting to try to understand the government process and try to change the law. And one of the things that they looked at was, under the old law, basically schools were only required to allow time once a week to recite the pledge, and they felt that it should be changed to a daily option. If we think back into the 1890s, at the time we were just still getting over, our Civil War. We still had people that were, split between the North and the South, and that brother versus brother. And the whole purpose of the pledge was to find a reason or find us an opportunity to unite our country and get people back under the one nation, and try to give us something that we could all do as a group to build us as a whole. And so I think that's, to me, what it means is it's about building that unity between us. We're one of the first countries that ever actually had a flag for the sole purpose of our country, before that, it was always kings and the kingdoms that they had. And so with us being, it's kind of a special process in the New World that, you know, we kind of set out this government for the people and by the people. So.
Our interview with the Representative Roden left us with even more questions. Unlike most of the individuals we spoke to, he did not touch on the subject of the troops or the importance of honoring them by reciting the pledge. He instead mentioned how the pledge is a source of unity. We seem to be stuck in the same place we were in the beginning of filming. What does the pledge mean? What's its purpose?
But I think that the terminology needs to be broad enough that it doesn't necessarily specify on one person's beliefs. You know, it's, like I said, it's just kind of a broad, just kind of belief that everyone shares.
Perhaps the pledge is what needs to be changed. If the wording was different to create a much more apparent purpose, people would be less apathetic. A clear pledge would ultimately limit tensions. What we've learned is that conflict is not over what is written in the pledge, but what one interprets from it.